will probably take more than was assigned, so I'm just going to go ahead and dive in. So here we're going to talk about loading MATLAB, running MATLAB scripts, and very briefly, we'll talk about starting the GUI. We'll go into more detail on that after lunch. The bottom line, one of the main takeaways from this section is that there's different recommended procedures for each HPC cluster. For UPPMAX, NSC, and HPC2N, you typically want to use the module system to load MATLAB at the command line and interact with it from the command line. At LUNARC, it's actually recommended that you use the GUI and do so through the on-demand menu. But there are interactive and non-interactive command line options. And actually, the recommendations are changing a little bit for HPC2N because there is now the option to interface with it with Open On Demand, which I will also cover briefly in the after lunch session. At PDC, you can run interactively with Desktop On Demand if you're lucky enough to get through on ThinLink, but that's restricted to 30 users for the entire Dardel cluster. And Dardel has, I don't know if it's hundreds or thousands of users, but it's a lot, and it's way more than can be served by 30 ThinLink licenses. So the recommended interface, if you want to use MATLAB, is the command line. And if you want to run interactively on a compute node, you can use X forwarding and this slloc command. As far as the module system goes, most HPC centers in Sweden use the same or a similar module system for their software. So the main differences will be in which modules are installed and their versions and their naming. If you need a reminder on module system commands, there's this little cheat sheet that you can consult. We also have a course on using, NAISS also offers a course periodically on selecting modules. That was, I believe, last month. We should have another session coming up in a few months. And, but I'm not going to go into that in detail. So again, all the module systems and module, the layout, the exact names of the modules, those are all going to vary from between different clusters. This is more relevant if you're used to working with something like Python, but some languages have a system installed version. This is not true for MATLAB, so you don't necessarily have to worry about accidentally using a system version. However, if you use ML load MATLAB or however this is typeset at your local center, it might be like all lowercase, it might be just the M uppercase, or the whole thing might be all capitalized, whatever. If you just, or it might even have like a little dash and then some other stuff like bdist or something like that. I've seen a module that was like MATLAB-bdist, and I have no idea what that means. But anyway, if you just type ML load and then MATLAB without the version name, it will typically load by default whatever the latest release is. And that release can be periodically updated. For reproducibility reasons, you should be sure to load the same release throughout a given project. So always make sure that you include a version number. As far as the module setup goes, UPPMAX and NSC use a relatively flat module hierarchy as opposed to the more strongly hierarchical schemes at the other centers. So that means that UPPMAX and NSC modules are shown by ML avail, whereas at the other centers, ML avail will only show what is available to load, given that you've loaded some prerequisites. So like at LUNARC, other modules might be hidden until you load like GCC or something. But at UPPMAX and NSC, everything that's not directly related to bioinformatics can be shown with ML avail. At HPC2N, LUNARC, and PDC, you need to use module spider to see all modules regardless of prerequisites, and use ML avail to show what is available to load given what is currently loaded. And if you want to check how to load specific versions of specific packages and what their prerequisites are, then you need to use module spider, the package name, and its version number. So, and one last note, if you're on Dardo, when you start a Dardo session, it starts with 13 modules preloaded, but only one of them is sticky. So that means that's one that's a sticky module is one that requires you to add the force flag to ML purge to get rid of it. But on Dardo, everything goes away. Almost everything you need goes away if you use module purge. So you have to use either ML unload, or if you're used to using purge, then what you might want to do instead is save the default modules as a module collection. And so you use module save and then give it some collection name like startup modules, and then you can reload them with module restore and then the name of the collection. I highly recommend that you do this on Dardel in case you accidentally use the purge command. All right. So now we're going to go over checking for MATLAB versions. For most of these, it's just either module spider MATLAB or module avail MATLAB. So HPC2N and LUNARC, it's ML spider. And also at Dardo, it's ML spider. UPPMAX and NSC, it's module avail. And so I have two windows. I have two ThinLink sessions open. So there's one on Pele and one on Cosmos. I will briefly show an example of how each one of these looks. So here I will start on Pele, which is at UPPMAX. So ML avail Matlab. Okay, so here you can see that the main Matlab modules are in all caps, and they can be loaded directly. But there's also these lowercase modules that are that have an E after them, and that means they're extensions for something else. So if I were to type ML and then all caps Matlab, this little D here means that this is the version that would load if I didn't include a version. So if I do ML Matlab, this would be equivalent to doing, for right now, this would be equivalent to doing ML and then just Matlab would be equivalent to writing ML Matlab / 2024A. However, that is subject to change. So always include the version number. And here's what it looks like on Cosmos, where the modules are more hierarchical. So if I were to try and do ML avail Matlab, Matlab is different because it can be loaded directly, so this will show up. But normally, for something like Python, it can't be Normally for something like Python, you have to load a version in order to look at it. But with MATLAB, that can be loaded directly, so it will still show MATLAB. But in order to see how to load any specific version, you need to use ML Spider and then say the MATLAB version. And notice that this here on Cosmos is all lowercase, whereas on Pele it was all uppercase. So let's see. The default version would be MATLAB 2024B right now. So if I did ML Spider MATLAB, this module can be loaded directly. So no prerequisites required. In fact, I think the only one where MATLAB requires a prerequisite is Dardel. And this one, on Dardel, it's required to load something like PDC and then some 3 or 4 digit version number. And HPC2N, it's pretty much the same as LUNARC. However, the ML avail command can be case sensitive, and on HPC2N it has to be in all caps in order to see everything, because the lowercase versions may match with some extension or may not match anything. All right. So it was let me look at the not participants, the chats. I want to see if participants, raise your hand if you were able to do a like ML Spider or ML Avail on your local machine and see available MATLAB versions. Or let me know if you're having let me know in the comments if you're having trouble with it. Okay. All right, so now let's try loading a module. As I noted before, at pretty much every facility except for Dardel, you don't need to load any prerequisites. So it should be as simple as ML and then MATLAB and the version number. So whatever you just whatever you want to choose as a version number, just load that version of MATLAB. So on Cosmos, I've chosen MATLAB 2024B. I know it's all lowercase, so I'm just going to load it like this. And now if I do ML to see what's loaded, you can see that MATLAB is loaded and it pulled in another few modules that are needed to render it. Why is GCC 11.3 loaded? Oh, that's new. Okay. I'm not used to seeing that. So I'm used to working with the 2023B. I guess that's the issue. So let me try on Pele. Let's try loading MATLAB 2024A. You notice I used all caps MATLAB/2024A. It loads perfectly fine. I check ML to see what's loaded. And now it's loaded this MathWorks service host and then MATLAB 2024A. So anyone have any trouble searching for and loading a MATLAB module? Don't see any screaming in the chats or raising hands. So let's see something real quick. 2023B. Okay, so that's either I hadn't noticed that before or okay. Let's continue. So UPPMAX, if you're on Rackham, the module load command is followed by the Matlab and the release number. Here on Rackham, the Matlab is all lowercase, except for the release number. And there are a lot more versions on Rackham, but Rackham is going away, so we're not going to cover it much here. On Pele, it's all uppercase. And there's the 2024B and there's 2023B-update 4. Those are the versions that are available. On HPC2N, the syntax is pretty similar to UPPMAX, all caps, and MATLAB is in all caps, and then you just give the year and either the A or the B in lowercase. On LUNARC, everything is all lowercase. On Tetralith, again, it's all uppercase except for the release number, and most of the versions that you want to use have this -bdist afterwards. However, if you forget that bdist, it usually aliases the version without aliases to the one that has it. And on PDC, on Dardel, when this documentation was written, the latest version was PDC/23.12, and that was required to load MATLAB 2024B. And you can load both modules in one line. It just can make it a little bit harder to troubleshoot if you load everything in one line. Let me see how we're doing time-wise. So I have until 2050. All right. Now we're going to work on starting MATLAB at the command line. So most of the time you'll run MATLAB, you'll run either MATLAB live scripts or basic script or function files. And if you're running the live scripts, you'll be using the GUI. In fact, yeah, live scripts can only be opened and worked on in the GUI. Basic function or script files can be run from a batch script or from the bash command line. That being said, if you're working on the command line, function definition is typically not supported unless the function is really short and anonymous. If you want to define a function with a name, it has to be written up and saved to a separate .m file. At a lot of centers, the GUI is still the recommended, or at places where the GUI is offered, it's often the recommended interface. So I mentioned before that the recommended interface at LUNARC is to use on demand. And that is now also true for HPC2N, albeit through a different mechanism. And that will be shown those will be shown in the simultaneous session after lunch. Slurm jobs can be set up and run through either the parallel computing toolbox within the GUI, which we'll discuss later, or it can be set up at the command line in a submission script. Also, keep in mind the resources required to run the GUI and the resources required to run a job submitted to Slurm are separate. So you don't have to worry if the maximum allocation time for a MATLAB GUI session is much less than the time limit for a Slurm job. They're two different things. Once you send the Slurm job off, it's already off in the ether, getting ready to run. You don't have to worry about it anymore. Well, unless it actually unless it gets canceled for some reason, but it won't be because the MATLAB GUI closes. All right, let's talk briefly about single comp thread. When you're starting MATLAB from the command line, you need to use, if you're not sure where you're starting, or if you know you're starting on, if you know you're running the command line on a terminal on the front end, you need to use single comp thread. This flag is required to prevent MATLAB from spawning as many processes as it thinks it needs, up to the full capacity of the node. At most HPC centers, the typical terminal that you find will launch MATLAB, either the GUI or on the command line interface. That will launch on a login node by default. And if you hog a login node, that can disrupt jobs and access for other users, which is a violation of the NAISS user agreement. And it will have the local admins chasing you down. So don't do that. HPC center staff reserve the right to kill disrupted tasks without warning, and repeated instances may result in a suspension of your user privileges. A few HPC centers detect if you have if you've started on a login node, and will automatically set max comp threads to 1, but don't rely on that if you're not sure, if you're not absolutely sure. When in doubt, use single comp thread. And again, setting single comp thread does not prevent MATLAB from sending off parallelized or multi-threaded jobs to Slurm or to the MATLAB distributed computing server, which I don't think any of our centers use this, but if you go to any of the MATLAB Monday sessions, they will use this. Okay, so let's type along. We're going to start a MATLAB session on the command line, and we're going to do it on by default on the front end. So we've got MATLAB loaded on Pele. On this terminal, this is a terminal that's running on the front end node, which is Pele 1. So that's one of the login nodes. So if you want to start MATLAB, you want to type, so MATLAB, no desktop, single comp thread, no display, no splash. So sometimes no display is enough, but oftentimes you also need no desktop and no splash. So actually I should go back and put the most important one first. So let's do no display. Stop, no splash. Okay, and then this should start MATLAB safely on the login node. So you can see Pele 1, this is a login node. And now it's loading. And like I said, MATLAB can be rather slow because it's optimizing for user friendliness, not so much speed. And we'll discuss interactive and compute node running in just a minute. All right, now you can do it like 1 + 2, answers 3. And if you want to exit out, it's you just type exit. And it's pretty much the same story on Cosmos. So if you want to start MATLAB, you just type. And you'll notice I opened this terminal from favorites. This terminal runs on the login node. It always runs on the login node. If you want to run a terminal on anything other than a login node, you need to go to one of these terminals in Applications General, or if you're going to do really heavy graphically intensive work, then you need to go to this graphics terminal. But 9 times out of 10, if you want to use a terminal on Cosmos, you want to go to one of these applications general terminals. But I'm just going to show you what it looks like on the login node. Single comp thread, no display, no desktop, no splash. You can see this works just fine here as well. That was a little bit quicker. And again, you can just 6 + 18, 24. You're running in Matlab. And then if you want to get out, you just type exit. Right. So on UPPMAX, on UPPMAX and on NSC, you're a little bit lucky because if you forget everything except for no display, it will still automatically, it will still do what I just showed. And the maximum number of computational threads will be set to 1. That is not necessarily true on HPC2N, and it's definitely not true on LUNARC. And on Dardel, it varies depending on whether you're affiliated with KTH or if you're have been added to the MATLAB user group by PDC support or not. So on Dardel, you need to load the corresponding PDC, PDC old, or PDC test prerequisites, then MATLAB, and then you can run all the commands that we just showed if you're on the terminal. If you're an academic user who has been vetted by PDC staff, then this should all be enough. However, if what you see is please enter your MathWorks email address and account, yada, 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 where it's asking for your credentials, that means that PDC support did not receive your request for MATLAB access. Ooh, what happened here? It is possible to run, like I said before, it's possible to run MATLAB from on demand on PDC, but don't count on it. All right. Now we'll have a quick look at the running the GUI. So on HPC2N, if you're logged into a remote desktop, then what you would use is this slloc command. Here you ask for a specific number of nodes, then the time, then give your account, which will be HPC2N, the current year, and then some 3-digit number. It looks very similar to the interactive command that some other facilities use, but it's slloc, and it's I believe it's the same on, yes, it's the same on Dardel. On Dardel, you can ask for a full node using the main partition, but if you want just a subset of the number of cores, then you would have to select this dash C flag for cores to give the number of cores, and then specify this P partition and call it shared. So keep in mind the difference between the commands for using a full node versus using a subset of a node. On UPPMAX, it's very much similar to what I just showed, except that to start with, you need to if you're on the, okay, so this is on, that's on Rackham. To start a MATLAB GUI session on a compute node, you use interactive and use interactive, give the number of cores with a lowercase n, the time, and the account. If you don't specify a number of cores, I think it should give you 1 by default. So let us show a demonstration here. So I already specified an instance previously when I was testing this. So
on Bianca, it will be the Sense project that you're using.
Thank you. Yes.
That's the info for Ashika.
Do 2 cores. So here, if I enter interactive, I give it a time of 5 minutes just because this is going to be really quick. And so it keeps it short in the queue. Then I give the account, which on UPPMAX is UPPMAX 2025, and then 2-360 for this session. Give that a start. And now you see that the prompt changed from Pele to P103. So now we know that we're on a compute node. And now we can do check the availability of MATLAB. We already know. Load MATLAB, like so. And then start MATLAB without most of the prompts that we previously used. So if I do like this, then in a moment the GUI will pop up. So you can see this MATLAB loading screen is starting. And unfortunately, this is quite small. Oh, so that error is still happening. Okay. Well, I don't think that is necessarily critical. So, but you can see now we're on the MATLAB. We're in the MATLAB GUI at the MATLAB command line. I'm sorry about the really small font. This doesn't seem to play well with my external monitor, but you do like 2 + 3, it will run. You get an answer of 5. So you know MATLAB is running. And then I'm just going to X out. And then if I want to recover my time, I think I can do exit. Yes. So if you finish a job early and you want to quit your interactive session early to recover the time and not charge your allocation budget, then you can just type exit. On Cosmos, it's a little bit different. I'm going to exit this terminal. If you want on Cosmos, generally you want to go through this on-demand menu, and I will demonstrate this after lunch. If for some reason that's not working, then what you want to use is you can go to the CPU terminal, and I should just show this after lunch as well, because this is the same thing. This is what the on-demand system works like in Cosmos. And you already saw that there is, as a reminder, this terminal is the one that runs on the login node. So you do not want to use this terminal with the MATLAB GUI. Just don't do it. All right. As a final exercise, try to load, run, and do a few simple commands at the command line on your local cluster. So I already walked through this. You should have this, you may also have this function from the exercises. If not, minimize this. If not, you can save this function to your local, copy and paste this function to your local center. Not that one. This one. So I am going to, let's see, where am I? I'm going to CD into documents. UPPMAX. This function was named add to, I believe. Yeah, add to. I'm going to do add to.m. Open that. Then I'm just going to copy this function and then paste it in here. Save it. Close it. And then I am going to redo this little interactive command. I don't need very many resources for this, so I'm just going to go ahead and start that. And then I am going to run this function in MATLAB, in the MATLAB command line. So I'm going to load MATLAB, start MATLAB on the command line. Let's see what this does for the number of cores. It should set this to automatic. No, it doesn't, because it's not on the compute node. Anyway, so then I'm just going to do add to, I think the syntax is like this. Yes. So you can see the function is found automatically because every folder within my home directory is added to the MATLAB path. And then you just, once you're done running a code, you just type exit. Was anyone able to run this little add to example in MATLAB? Relinquish my allocation. All right, and with that, we are at the end of this particular lecture. So to summarize, you can start the MATLAB either in a GUI or with the no display with the no display flag. You can run it in the terminal. If you start either interface from the terminal, you have to load the correct modules, and for interactive work, you'll usually have to reserve time on a compute node, but some facilities have a desktop on-demand interface. And we'll cover that after lunch. If you take the risk of starting on the command node, or on a login node, you need to use this single comp thread flag to make sure that you don't hog the login node, unless you are absolutely 100% sure that your cluster sets that constraint on the login node automatically. Any questions? Raise your hand if you've got any questions. So I ran over a little bit, but I think we should take is 10 minutes enough, or should we just take a 15-minute break?
15 minutes is good, I think.
Okay, so we shall return at